I'm a mother raising 2 children. Have you ever heard of a child bride? It's an old marriage custom that you would only see in history books, but there was a true and blue example of a child bride around me. That happened to be my birth mother. She lived an unhappy life because of her father, that is my maternal grandpa. He was an only son of a very wealthy family, but early on he became addicted to gambling and sold off that vast property from gambling and even sent his own daughter as a child bride to pay for his gambling debts. My mom was sent away as a child bride when she was just 15 years old. It was less than a month after her own mom, her sole protector, passed away. Her heartless father sent my mom away when she wasn't even over the sadness of losing her mother in exchange for paying off his gambling debts. Catherine, if you go to that household, they will send you to school properly and you won't have to starve. I'm useless to you for you to stay with me. It's your destiny, so think positively and live in a nice house. My grandma named my mom Catherine, which meant pure, to be precious, but my grandpa sold her off over a few dollars and made himself drunk. I guess he was ashamed to see his own daughter being sent away like that. Thus, my mom didn't even get to graduate from middle school and ended up going to a stranger's household in the countryside. Contrary to my grandpa's claim that she was going to a wealthy household, she ended up deep in the countryside with hardly anything around but barren land. The family was huge, and she had so many young sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law coming out of every corner. She had elderly parents-in-law and a husband who was almost 30 years old, and below him were 7 sisters and brothers. There was one more brother-in-law, but he got married early and went to live with his wife's family, so he wasn't living there, including my dad. Her husband had 9 siblings. On top of that, my mom's great-grandmother-in-law also was living in the same household. At a glance, they couldn't afford to get a daughter-in-law as they were barely subsisting and couldn't feed another mouth. The reason they took my mother in as their daughter-in-law was because of my dad. My dad was just big physically, but he was very fearful and stuttered, who had a low IQ. That was why he couldn't get married, even though he was an almost 30-year-old bachelor. Still, he was the eldest and they couldn't let him grow old unmarried, so they were going to get a wife for him even if he had low IQ. But after learning about the family status, no one would be willing to give their daughter to marry their eldest son, so they ended up paying for my grandpa's gambling debts. In order to bring my mom to be their son's bride. However, there was a condition to that. My grandpa told them that they must send my mom to graduate from high school, or he wouldn't let her marry their son. So they promised to my grandpa that they would abide by that promise to bring my mom. Actually, they had no intention to keep that promise, but they just promised my grandpa that they would send my mom to high school and have the wedding ceremony after my mom turned 18. Growing up as an only child, my mom said that she was surprised to see so many sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law. When she saw a baby boy still suckling, she was shocked and speechless. On top of that, the first sister-in-law and 2 brothers-in-law were older than my mom. The second sister-in-law was my mom's age. And when she thought of living with all these people, she felt sick to her stomach. Her mean mother-in-law sighed as soon as she saw my mom. "But you're so frail, so how could you work on the farm properly? If we were going to bring a girl, it should have been a strong girl. But what would we do with a weakling like that? Do you know how to cook and do the laundry? Or do you know how to work on the farm field? So why won't you answer? Were you deaf and dumb?" Even before my mom let down her bags, she hit my mom in the head with her fist. Sharp. Then my dad ran over and hit her behind him from his mother. "Hey mom, don't hit my bride. She is so tiny and pretty. There's no place to hit you. You can hit me instead." "Okay, still you stupid fool. Akanatakachen, are you already siding with your bride? If you were that heartbroken to see your bride being hit, okay then, I will hit you." When my grandma started to beat on my dad, my great-grandma shouted at her, "What are you doing? How dare you beat up our precious eldest offspring of our family clan, even at that in front of his bride and his younger siblings. If you hit our eldest grandson once more, I will make sure to kick you out of our house." At my great-grandma's scolding, my grandma feebly went into the kitchen. My aunts and uncles laughed at the scene. The only one who couldn't laugh was my mom. She said that my dad was just big physically, but he wasn't very intelligent. Still, he cared for my mom dearly and loved her. He looked at my mom, who was different from other girls in the farm with fair skin and crystal clear eyes, and adored her pretty face. However, because of that, my grandma and aunties pestered my mom even more out of jealousy. Nevertheless, my dad served as a protector of my mom when she had no one to lean on. The promise to send my mom to high school was forgotten long ago, and my mom had to work for the household like a maid. She had to take care of the household chores from farm work to taking care of young sisters and brothers-in-law. At least, they were aware of the neighbors and deferred the wedding between my mom and their old bachelor son until my mom became of legal age. They couldn't help but do that, because my mom was smaller for her age, and because of her immature body, she had her menstrual period late and looked 2 or 3 years younger than her actual age. So they had to defer the wedding. Whenever my dad looked at my mom, he would smile and ask when would she marry him. At first, she hated to hear that, but later she felt sorry for him, who had to wait for a young bride to reach a legal age to get married. Even though they were not married, they took my mom in as their daughter-in-law and worked her to death without doing anything for her. Still, my mom did her best taking care of her future husband's family. She felt grateful since her own parent abandoned her because it was too hard to make a living, and they took her in and fed her and clothed her with a roof over her head. One thing she wished was going to school. Before she was sent to this family, she was at the top in the whole school, never missing being the first in ranking since elementary school. So my mom taught herself by looking at the middle school textbooks that her eldest sister-in-law had used. After a full day's work, her body ached as if it would break, but she would sit in front of a warm wooden stove in the kitchen and enjoy studying by herself. A few years later, something unexpected happened. One day, she happened to look at the math homework that my uncle was doing and found that none was correct. So she explained how to do the math to my uncle, and my grandpa saw that. When his daughter-in-law, who didn't even graduate from elementary school, teaching her brother-in-law middle school math, he was impressed. So he asked her how she knew to solve the problems. My mom told him that she taught herself looking at the middle school textbooks that her sister-in-law used to use. Then his eyes became large with surprise. He realized then why my mom's dad insisted that they send my mom to high school. If you would let me go to school, I will study hard and make sure to help out the family. I am very confident, so please send me to school. At my mom's tired pleadings, my grandpa pondered and finally made a decision that he would send my mom to school. He felt that he could see that she would be the type of person worthy of the money spent to send her to school. However, my grandma thought it differently. It's not even a boy, so why should we send a girl to school? She's not our child and is someone else's child. I am against it. And if you send her to school, who will babysit our youngest son? Both you and I are busy enough working on the farm. Anyhow, I can't ever send her to school, so be it. Mother, if you send me to school, I will work harder than now. Please send me to school. I will put my baby brother-in-law on my back and go to school. Please, I'm begging you. Really. Okay, then try like that. Whether you carry your baby brother-in-law on your back or on your head, see if you can go to school like that. But if you use the school as your excuse and do not do your household chores properly, I will kick you out of this house on that very day. That was how my mom was able to attend school again. She quit school when she was in 5th grade, but she was able to skip a grade and get into 6th grade. But as promised, she had to take care of her baby brother-in-law, so she had to attend classes carrying the baby on her back. It would never be possible these days, but during my mom's days, it was a common scene for the students living in the countryside. At the time, many children were put to work in their family farm due to lack of workers. When her baby brother-in-law cried during class, she had to get up from her seat and go to the back of the classroom, and she had to take the class while soothing the baby by standing. When she got home, she had to do her usual household chores. Even though no one pushed her to study, my mom studied hard as if her life depended on it, and she finally graduated from high school. The process wasn't easy. When she went to middle school, she could no longer take her baby brother-in-law with her to school, and she was on the verge of dropping out of school. However, my great-grandma was proud of my mom and took sympathy to her and offered to babysit the baby while my mom was in school. Since her mother-in-law decided, my grandma couldn't override her decision, although it didn't resolve my mom's problems completely. With so many children in the family, they couldn't afford to spend any more money for my mom's education. Then one day, things just exploded with my grandma. I don't have money to pay for Catherine's school expenses, which is breaking my back. Why are you making me suffer by bringing a girl like that, who is not helpful for our family? I can't do it any longer. Either you send her away or just kill me. You do whatever you want. Whenever school fees had to be paid, my grandma blamed my mom and caused havoc, so my grandpa gave in to her tantrums. Thus, my mom was on the verge of not finishing her middle school. Thankfully, my great-grandma stepped in. "Okay, I will take care of my great-granddaughter-in-law, as long as you don't have to pay for any school fees." Then the problem is solved, right? Answer me, would that be acceptable then? My grandma barely spoke. "Well, if it won't cost me any money, then okay then, done." My great-grandma sold her gold ring and bracelets to pay toward my mom's school expenses. Then she asked my mom to start up a business with her. My great-grandma was great at making dumpling soup, and she suggested selling that in the farmer's market. So my mom and great-grandma started making dumpling soup to sell. My great-grandma made the dumpling soup while my mom was in school, and after school, my mom would take the soup to sell it in the farmer's market. She would come back at night, do the house chores, and help to make more dumplings with her grandmother-in-law. I asked my mom whether she was ashamed when she met her classmates in the farmer's market, but my mom replied, "All I thought about was finding a way to study as much as possible, so no other thoughts came to my mind." Great-grandma was suffering on my behalf, so now that I think back to those times, I really worked hard. Because my great-grandma was a great cook, the dumpling soup sold well. The money was more than enough to pay for my mom's school expenses. When the balance of money was given to help out the family, my grandma no longer complained about my mom going to school. My mom worked hard, combining studying, doing food business, and taking care of the household chores. She finally graduated from high school and got a job at a company. She became the only worker who received regular paychecks monthly. It was very helpful for the family to receive a steady income every month so that they could plan ahead. My mom's paycheck went into paying for the family expenses, including school expenses for our younger sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law. My grandpa and grandma were finally able to breathe with peace of mind over the educational costs of their children. By then, my mom was proud that she could be helpful for doing her share for the family. But not too long after my mom got the job, my great-grandma passed away. She was the only one who stood up for my mom, and because she was no longer there for her, life became more difficult under her mother-in-law. My grandmama was jealous of my mom, who was working among well-educated and handsome men at her work, and insisted that my mom sleep in the same room with my dad even before they had their wedding. Who knows that you will meet up with some guy and run away? Do you know how many years you have been living here? You must not forget that you came in here as my daughter-in-law, as a child bride. What have you done for the family, except having your father-in-law and great-grandmother-in-law wrapped around your fingers to let you go to school? If you have a mouth, you should say it. You should give birth to a healthy son by now. Then, I won't say anything. I won't say anything about her working outside of home. My grandma was fearful that my mom might run away now that she is educated and skilled, so my mom ended up marrying my dad at a younger age of 18. A year later, she got pregnant with me. My mom got fired from her job because they thought she was single, but she got pregnant. In those days, married women couldn't work, and it was common practice. Only then, my grandma regretted what she forced my mom to do, since she lost a steady, regular monthly income overnight. It was her fault for not knowing that. While being pregnant, my mom had no time to rest, doing housework as well as farm work. She could never dream of doing any prenatal care for her baby. Her morning sickness was severe, and she could hardly eat anything except chew on some breadcrumbs. Then her sisters-in-law would tell my mom, and my grandma would scold her, and the whole family treated very harshly against my mom throughout her pregnancy. The only person who was nice to my mom was my dad. He was afraid that my mom would starve to death, and secretly he would bring her candies or snacks. To this day, my mom says whenever she sees hard candies, they reminded her of my dad. Even though he was less intelligent than other people, he had the warmest and kindest heart. In spring, my mom gave birth to me. My grandma was mean to her because she gave birth to a girl rather than a boy that she was expecting. How dare you lie down and rest when you only gave birth to a girl? Get up. You don't deserve any postpartum care. So much work has piled up. My mom ended up working only 1 week after giving birth. She felt it would be better to cook herself rather than receiving food from her pouting sister-in-law, who was angry she had to work. On top of that, my grandma was nagging too. Despite the whole family being thoughtless and cold toward my mom, who just gave birth to a baby, my dad was different. He would come by several times a day while he was working on the farm to help my mom. Thus, on my mom's behalf, he would bathe me and change diapers. His love for my mom and me was greater than anyone else. When my first birthday came around, my mom was looking to bake a birthday cake for me, and my aunt saw that and told on my mom to my grandma, making her run over to the house from the farm field. She yelled at my mom, "Is money rotting? It's not even a son, yet you are trying to bake a cake to share with the neighbors by throwing a party. I can't believe this. If you have any money for that, why don't you try and buy a gift for me? You take your baby as an excuse and force me to work on the farm field. How dare you try to play mom? If you do useless things like that once more, the Pearl Beach dates, then I won't put up with it." Ganta. Because of my grandma's scolding, my mom shed tears because she couldn't have my first birthday party for me by merely baking a small cake. All my dad could do after watching the scene was just comfort my mom. At that time, no one knew that this incident would turn into a tragedy. The next morning, my dad went out to the farm field, but he didn't return even during lunchtime. My mom carried me on her back to look for my dad and went out to the farm field, but he was nowhere to be seen. Then, the director of a senior center ran over calling for my mom that there was a big accident. He urged her to go uptown. My mom rushed over with me, still on her back, and there she found out that my dad had died from being a victim of hit and run. What made my mom break down was what she heard next. Etched to my dad's last breath, my dad wouldn't let go of a bag that had a small cake in it. My mom collapsed when she heard that. The night before, my mom complained to my dad why she couldn't even make a cake for her daughter's first birthday. She felt that if she didn't say that, my dad wouldn't have died, and she completely broke down. Later, when my grandma and the rest of the family rushed over and learned that my dad died while buying a cake, they blamed everything on my mom. "I bet you bitch. You killed my son just to get a birthday cake for your stupid daughter. You made my son die like that? You better die, you bitch. That was a keeple dax to Poctadil and make my son come alive." My grandma dragged my mom by her hair and screamed at my mom, who was half out of her wits. That night, she kicked my mom and me out of the house. My mom took a bus out to the coast thinking to jump into the sea and die when she lost her husband and was kicked out of the house overnight. But when I cried from being hungry, my mom couldn't bring herself to do it. She couldn't kill me, who was crying, trying to stay alive. So she decided to live. She didn't have any money except a gold ring that my great-grandma gave to her. She sold that and went into a small inn. But with the money, she couldn't stay there except for only a few days. She carried me on her back to look for a job, but with a suckling baby, she couldn't find anywhere to work. Then she went into a small restaurant to eat, and coincidentally, the restaurant owner, who was an old lady, helped her by having her stay in a small room attached to the restaurant, and she started selling the dumpling soup that she learned from my great-grandma. Through word of mouth, people from far even came to eat the delicious and soothing dumpling soup. A few years later, the restaurant owner, who was getting too old, sold the restaurant to my mom, and she went to live with her children. After that, my mom and I lived there for nearly 20 years. Then I moved into the city to go to college. My mom didn't want to send me away alone into the city, so she opened up a restaurant in the city. The city people liked the country-style dumpling soup, and not too long after it was opened, customers kept coming. By the time I graduated from college, the restaurant was moved to a larger space, and my mom had to hire many more workers as it became very successful. Then, when the internet usage flourished, a group of people who traveled together and hunted for hot places to eat spread words about our restaurant, and it was featured even on TV many times. Once my mom was kicked out without a penny and even weathered through hard economic times, and I was able to go abroad to study and had no problem getting a good job. After I got a job during vacation time, I would travel abroad with my mom, often. Even when I was preparing for my marriage with my coworker, my mom helped me. It was the day I went to meet my husband's parents for the first time. I was worried whether his family might not like me because I grew up under a single mom. When his father asked me what was my mom's profession, I told him about a restaurant. Then his face brightened, saying that he and his wife loved the dumpling soup as they happened to be regular customers of our restaurant. They asked whether, because of me, they no longer need to stand in line to get into our restaurant. I told them that they could eat the soup free for the rest of their lives, thanks to my mom being the owner of a popular restaurant. I was able to get married without any problem, with my mom's help, even after I got married. I could live happily, raising my 2 children without worrying about any money problems. But then, my paternal grandma and her family got the whiff of money because they heard about my mom's successful restaurant. They barged in at the restaurant. Just because they were my dad's siblings, they came in a bunch and demanded money suddenly that I felt they were the worst people to deal with. Also, my aunt that I saw for the first time acted as if my mom ran away after she got married. She snapped. Honestly, if it weren't for my dad, would you have been able to get any high school education? In order to put you through school, my sister is right. Because of you, after my brother died, my dad passed away early from shock. So being the youngest child, I couldn't even attend any school and worked as a servant for another family. When I heard that you became an owner of a restaurant, if you were a decent human being, you would open up a branch for me. If you don't open up a branch for me, I will put up on the internet the details about what a rotten and thankless person you are and make your restaurant go out of business. So you decide. My mom, who quietly listened to my dad's sister and brother, opened her mouth. Jenny, just because time has passed, you shouldn't make up things. Did you say your dad couldn't send you to high school because he sent me to school instead? Your grade was too poor and you flunked out of high school. Every neighbor knows that. Why blame me when you didn't study and brought it onto yourself? And I paid for my school expenses by selling dumpling soup in the farmer's market. You made an excuse that you will get a job in a factory and left home. But rather than getting a job, you met up with a bum and lived with him. Don't you remember asking me to send you money so often? After graduating from high school, I got a job and I sent you money secretly behind your mom and dad? You ruined your own life, and how dare you blame that on me? Because it was in the past, you must be living, forgetting what you did before. But that doesn't mean what you did will be erased. If I go now and talk to your current husband and tell him about your past, you would be forced to be divorced. Also, blame. I raised you by carrying you on my back and changing your diapers. And yet, what are you going to do to a person I raised you by carrying you on my back and changing your diapers? And yet, what are you going to do to the person who raised you? After your brother died, you tell me that your family went bankrupt. But did you know that your household had nothing? All of you just broke your parents' back and never worked to earn any money. You all made excuses to take money from me and spend it. The only ones who treated me like a human being were not you guys, but my husband and great-grandma. The only people who could demand money or a branch restaurant would be just those two people. Are you threatening me that you would put up the words criticizing me on the internet? Go ahead. I will hire the best law firm and make sure to teach you what justice is. If you come here once more and cause trouble like this, I would deal with you one by one with legal justice. After seeing my mom's stern attitude, my dad's siblings left. However, a few of them shamelessly filed a lawsuit against my mom. Eventually, my mom had to hire a large law firm, but before even any trial, the judge dismissed the case. It was obvious because they had no evidence that my mom took any of their money or caused damages, and it was just their accusations. Still, they put up criticizing words about my mom's restaurant, so my mom had to file a lawsuit against them. Because of that, my uncle, who put up the lies, had to pay the penalty. Then he came to the restaurant, sobbing and causing havoc, begging for forgiveness since he had no money to pay for the penalty or face a jail sentence. He worked at the restaurant until that money was paid up, cleaned the hall, and washed the vegetables. After working, if he still wanted to run a restaurant, I would think about opening up a branch. However, he had to save up money to open up a restaurant on his own. Got that? Thus, my youngest uncle has been working at the restaurant ever since. I don't know how long he will last, but because my mom raised him when he was a baby, my mom seems to feel as if he were her son rather than a brother-in-law. She seemed to hope that he would work hard and open up a branch for himself. If it were me, I wouldn't do that for him. Although my mom had to be sold as a child bride because her dad got into gambling debts when I watch my mom. I sometimes think that success is not made by circumstances, but by one's will. So, I tell myself that I should do my best each day, even though things are hard. I hope all of you will find hope and never give up. Thank you for listening to my story. Please cheer for me and rate your comments of wisdom in the comment section. Pressing like and subscription is a big help to me. Take care.